First of all, biggest issue, I suppose, today is about the US bombing Iranian targets in Iraq and Syria. We've had a statement from the Iraqi government saying this aggressive strike will put security in Iraq and the region on the brink of the abyss, and it also contradicts efforts to establish the required stability. Now, the allegation is it's about Iranian targets. It's not necessarily about Iraq, but certainly the Iraqis are pretty narc, Richard Power Sayeed, especially because 16 people, including civilians, were apparently killed in the strikes, according to Iraqi figures, another 25 people wounded.
Yeah, well, look, we've seen this story over and over and over, right? Let's say it began in 9/11, but it happened on October the 7th as well. The US and its allies get dragged into conflicts that they can't win because they feel that they've got to respond to some aggression, when we know that the way that you end these kinds of conflicts is by trying to dial down the violence. So did the US need to put out some kind of response? Sure, but ultimately the solution to this is going to be, for instance, forcing the next Israeli administration into acknowledging a Palestinian state.
Should they have withdrawn from Afghanistan in the first place, is my question.
From Afghanistan?
Yes.
I mean, Afghanistan was another example of one of these kind of unwinnable wars, right? I would say the people who made the decision to go into Afghanistan didn't do it because they thought they were going to win it. They did it because they didn't want China and Russia to have influence there, and they knew that as long as they were there, they'd be stopping. So
my point is, not just mentioning the Middle East, but also mentioning Afghanistan and South Asia, is essentially saying the Americans often go into things, but they don't know how they're going to end. None of us know how they're going to end. And now we have a situation in Iraq, which has been massively changed by the illegal invasion and the fact that Iranian targets are there, and there is apparently Iranian resistance manifesting itself in Iraq and Syria.
So I think you've got some kind of naive liberals in the US and across NATO who go in thinking, oh, we're going to try to democratize this country or whatever it is. We're going to force a particular set of political elites onto this country.
Is it not more a neocon than a liberal kind of idea?
Well, so I would say that the neocons kind of behind that kind of rhetoric actually understood very clearly that they were going into these countries, Afghanistan and Iraq, simply in order to occupy them so that Russia and China
you don't think neocons wanted to impose our way of life and impose democracy?
I'm not sure if they really believed in that
that's
kind of stuff.
Okay.
But perhaps what matters more is kind of what like the military elites behind these decisions had, and I think they're quite clear-sighted about the impossibility of kind of totally changing the political culture of a place. It was very obvious to anyone who was looking at it that Iraq was going to be dominated by Iran as soon as US influence reduced, and that's what's happened. The long-term solution to this is things like Obama's deal with Iran. You don't make deals with people because they're nice. You do it in order to dial down the tension so that you can carry on having a peaceful commercial life.
I want to bring Brent Suter in on this. What do you make of, I mean, this is very dramatic action in the last 24 hours. It was fairly unexpected, but of course there are many problems in the Middle East, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Middle East gets worse and worse every day. The US attacked in Iraq and Syria yesterday. But we have to start asking ourselves, when do we say we don't get involved anymore? When do we say that the West doesn't take any more responsibility?
I mean, Ben, I think that's a decent point, and there are quite a few talkTV viewers and listeners who've got in touch with me to say, look, maybe we're a bit overcommitted, actually. We've got Ukraine, boots on the ground. We were told there weren't boots on the ground. That was a lie. There's the Gaza conflict, where we're involved in some way. There is the, we're major problems with Russia, China, and also the UK military action in the Red Sea with the Houthi rebels. So there's a lot on those international fronts. What do you think we should or shouldn't be doing, Ben?
I mean, Iran is a threat. Iran is a threat to our way of life. Iran is a threat to the West and Israel and all these other people in the Middle East. And it's how do we combat that? I think, as Richard was discussing, Afghanistan, Iraq, it's way too far. Boots on the ground doesn't solve anything. If anything, it makes it worse, because at the end of the day, we just try to impose our way of life on people in the Middle East, which isn't...
Do you think life is worse for people in Iraq and Afghanistan today than it was 20 years ago?
I think it is.
Worse than under Saddam Hussein?
In Afghanistan at the moment, I think women and children are treated much worse than they were 20 years ago.